And welcome to another evening here at Caribbean HR Forum. We are once again offering an amazing, exciting opportunity to listen to one of our webinars. My name is Francis Wade, in case you haven't met me, and tonight we have a special event. So tonight we have Georgia Donaldson. She's our moderator, and she'll be hosting a panel discussion with doctors, two doctors, Hyacinth Guy and Ann Crick. So tonight's topic is, I'm going to read it straight from the sheet, HR leadership in returning to work from the lockdown. And I'm going to just post up, just bear with me a minute, I'm going to post up the first graphic. Tonight, instead of sharing screens, I'm putting graphics up in the chat. And as you come into the chat, you know what to do. Just say hi, say you can hear me. Hi, Georgia Simon. I just met you on LinkedIn. Oh, that was quick. Great to have you in. Trisha, hi Trisha. I'm looking to see who else is here. Hi Lori, good to see you again. Julie, hi Nadine from Bali, right? Wow, that's far away. Great. Okay, guys, so welcome again, and let me pull up my second slide while I. Oh, 1 second. You guys can see the slides, right? Yes, in the chat. You just saw me put up the main. No, let's see. No, not seeing slides. Are you seeing the graphic that I just put up with the lady with her voice open? Yep. Can you see that? Yes. Okay, great. Because that slide is just to point out to you that we're going to use the Q&A button heavily tonight. So tonight there are no slides. It's all discussion, and it's a rock and roll evening because you'll be discussing things with each other. You'll be doing a case study. You'll be asking questions of the panelists. It's all this special stuff that we'll be doing tonight, kind of for the first time almost. And just to remind you where you're at Carib HR Forum. The theme for our year is that HR puts on its own mask first, which means that HR takes care of its own self before looking to take care of all the others that it could take care of, because our argument this year is that HR has spent all this time since the recession of 2008 putting other employees' training and development needs first. And this year is the year for HR first. So tonight's logistics, I just put them up again in the chat. Part one, we're going to be spending in presentation mode, which will be right here, and you'll be witnessing a panel discussion. And in the second part of the evening, which once again will have its own link, we'll be taking questions. That's when the case study will come in, and then we're going to end up back in networking mode, back at the table. So we're going to go back and forth in part two. Here in presentation mode, going to discuss the cases, back in presentation mode to debrief the cases, and then back in networking mode to end the evening. We're doing all sorts of things that are unusual and interesting this evening. It's not your usual webinar where you just basically do the stuff that you always do and show slides and lots of talking. And just to remind you once again, yes, the presenters are keeping me very busy. Thanks, Julie. Yes. Just to remind you again of the graphic of where you're at. We are offering a webinar series that sometimes leads to a coaching circle, which is taking us up to the conference, which is coming up in September. And registration for the conference is going to officially open sometime soon. I'm going to put a graphic up for the conference page. If you haven't registered yet, you can register now. You could wait a little while, but in a while it's going to become, we're going to open the doors and it'll be officially time to register in the conference that's coming up. So this is all build up. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you have no idea what Carib HR Forum community is all about, go to community.caribhrforum.com. I just put up a slide with the link so that you can join us, and membership is absolutely free regardless of the level that you happen to be at. And we'd love to have you be a member of our community. You know, as you probably imagine, there's a lot of energy, a lot of great people, and we're in the middle of this series. Our next webinar is probably going to be around communication. Okay, so that you know, communication post-COVID. But anyway, enough of me and our background stuff. Let's jump into the business of the evening. Let me tell you about our moderator, Georgia Donaldson. So she's no stranger to presenting at workshops, and she is someone who has been involved with Toastmasters for many years. She spent 25 years creating opportunities for individuals and organizations to grow and develop through their HR management, business psychology, facilitation, coaching, and career guidance skills. She is the country chief culture human development officer at JMMB in Trinidad and Tobago. And she also owns a consulting firm called Corporate Options. She's a certified behavioral coach, a senior certified professional with SHRM, and a certified mediator through the Mediation Board of Trinidad and Tobago. Georgia also has a BS from UE, a Master's of Science from Franklin University. She's a member of SHRM and a member of HERMAT. And she's been my friend for a really long time, and she's been around for not ages, make her so old, but she's someone who it's great to have Georgia here be the moderator for tonight's event. So I'm going to bring her up on the stage. Give that graphic a moment to pop up. We should be able to hear her and see her. Hi, Georgia.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Great. Would you like to say a few words before I bring up your panelists?
Yes, sounds like I just died and you read my eulogy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Francis. Good evening, tribe. I know Dale loves to call you all tribe. Yes, it's really, really good. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening to moderate this panel discussion. It's even a greater pleasure for me because I have two wonderful two women who are two doctors. I'm not sure they can help us this evening with any COVID issues, but they may be able to help us with some organizational issues. So we have Dr. Crick and we have Dr. Guy with us. Dr. Crick is from Jamaica and Dr. Guy is from Trinidad and Tobago. And we specifically use these two ladies because we feel that they represent the Caribbean. Dr. Crick, who has that experience in the service industry, particularly in tourism, and so many of our islands in the Caribbean are into tourism and in the service sector. And then Dr. Guy, who is from Trinidad and Tobago, where oil is gold and manufacturing is bold. And we know there are several other countries in the Caribbean who also have manufacturing. So we thought both of them would be able to capture the essence of the Caribbean region. Let me tell you a little bit about each panelist that we have here. So Dr. Hyacinth Guy is a practitioner of organizational development and strategic human resource management for more than 35 years. And when she turns on her camera, you're going to say that she was lying. She's a principal director of Hyacinth Guy Human Resource Company. Another interesting thing about her is that she has a PhD in conflict analysis and resolution. And she also studied at the university, an MBA from Andrews University in Michigan. She is an expert in personal and organizational development, and she's a life success coach. So anybody who's looking for a coach, she's one of the persons who you really need to talk to. Let's talk about Dr. Ann Crick. Now, Ann Crick is a senior lecturer and a former head of the Department of Management Studies and the Center for Hospitality and Tourism Management located in Nassau, Bahamas. So these people are all over the Caribbean region. Her first degree is in hotel management from the University of the West Indies, and she has an MS in organizational management and a PhD in organizational management from Rutgers. So I'd love for you now to just put your hand together, and maybe you can find a hand or an applause in your chat. Find an applause and welcome these two ladies on stage. So we're putting our hands together and we're welcoming them. Wonderful. And this now I think is a really good time for you to show your flag. So these two ladies are representing, one from Jamaica, one from Trinidad and Tobago. And let me tell you about me. I'm a Jamaican living in Trinidad and Tobago. So I can raise two flags. So put your flags now. Raise your flag to tell us which country you're from. If you don't have your flag, just write in the chat and tell us which island you're representing. So let's take a few seconds and see those coming through now.
Are you seeing my literal flag, Georgia?
We are seeing your flag.
I'm seeing your flag. I tell you, you Jamaican. You Jamaican.
Can't miss it.
You can't say it right.
I think it's straight to the bone, and it's Jamaican to the core.
Yes.
But only one of us brought a flag.
What?
Only one of us brought a flag.
Good. I'm seeing some flags coming on. Wonderful. Wonderful. Good. Thank you so much. Now, the focus of our discussion this evening, we're going to be looking at the great return. So many of us have been, with bated breath, anticipating this great return. So many persons have been working from home since March. Some people are now shell-shocked, staying home for so long, and cabin fever. And some persons have already started to return to office, and some are planning, and some persons are doing it on a phased basis. And so we thought it would be very important this evening for us to look at what's going to be involved and what's HR's role in this return. And we thought we'd focus on 3 P's. We have to look at our people, we have to look at policies, and we have to look at protocols. And when we think of our people, we have to think of the psychosocial impact that this return will have on our people. And the policies, how are we designing these policies now to make sure that we're still true to our culture, and to make sure that, these now serve and suit the new norms that we're working with. And our protocols, are we complying with health and safety guidelines? So before I ask the ladies to jump right in their discussion, I'm going to ask your audience to just answer this quick question. And listen to this one. What types of jokes are allowed during the quarantine? Anybody can answer that question, put it in the chat. So this is a bar joke, if you didn't know. And I will buy a round after. So I'll give you 10 seconds. What types of jokes are allowed during quarantine? 9, 8, 7, nobody? The answer is inside joke.
None.
Let's hear some laughter. Keep it covered. Yes, I'm seeing some smiling faces. Inside joke. Wonderful. Good. All right, ladies. I know our tribe, they want to hear from you. So I'm going to ask you to start. And I think I'll ask you to start off. We know different governments have been gradually reopening their economies. So tell us what's happening in your neck of the woods, in Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay. Georgia, happy to be here. Thanks for asking me. Happy to be on the same panel with Anna. And I'm looking forward to the participation that we'll have this evening and hearing from the participants. Okay, so we in Trinidad, we are emerging from this great lockdown and the effects of COVID. And, I think that as a country, and not just Trinidad and Tobago, I think the whole Caribbean, we have done really very, very well in managing this pandemic. I think the Caribbean can really hold itself proud in the way we managed it. In Trinidad, at this point, we have 123 cases, and 123 is coming after maybe 2 or 3 weeks where we stood still at about 114 or 15 thereabouts. Unfortunately, we had 8 deaths, but as of today, what is important is that we didn't have any community cases. So in managing the entire process, government of Trinidad and Tobago, they had a really well-coordinated, well-oiled machinery, and the coming out of the pandemic was staged, and the government outlined 5 phases that they would employ in coming out of this pandemic and reopening the economy. First phase was on the 10th of May. As you know, everything was closed down. We were quarantined. Everything was closed down except for the essential services. And the first phase, they slowly opened back restaurants. They didn't have in-dining. Up to now, we don't have in-dining. We had some opening of the hardware stores and some outdoor activities. And that was from the 10th of May. Then there was another phase on the 21st of May when manufacturing opened. And some construction sector went out to work. We had opening of like auto repair shops, laundries, and so on. Third phase, which was just about a week and a half ago, the 1st of June, all retail businesses opened, but they had to be closed by 6 o'clock. Public service, this was a significant one. The public service went back out to work on the 1st of June. Hotels and outdoor dining facilities were allowed to serve guests. Public transport remained at 50%. It's going to go to 75% a little later on, but we still had certain restrictions. Gathering still cannot be more than 5 persons. They made a little bit of an accommodation for funerals. Of course, all of the other hygiene issues we had to adhere to, and the wearing of PPE and so on. The fourth phase was the 8th of June, where we had the reopening of places that we would consider high contact, like spas and hairdressers and barbers and so on. We had domestic workers going back out to work. And then we have another phase, which is the 5th phase, which was the reopening of beaches and rivers. Sporting activities can resume. That is expected to be June the 22nd. So that's next week. Our borders still have not reopened. Schools remain closed. They have just announced that the SCA will be held on the 20th of August. So for the most part, the roads have become busy again.
Yes.
And organizations are managing that re-entry process. So that is what is happening in Trinidad.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Hyacinth, I'm proof this evening that the hairdressers have reopened.
Very good.
Yes. So Anne, I think you might have a little different experience in Jamaica, because Jamaica didn't seem to have closed at all. What's happening in Jamaica?
All right, thank you very much. And everyone, I'm very, very happy to be here. And I want to echo what Hyacinth said, that, you know, I think the Caribbean can step up and stand up and be very proud. I think that we have really managed this pandemic well, and we have a way to bash ourselves. We must stand up and, you know, applaud ourselves when we do things well. So Jamaica, as you mentioned, Georgia, we never went fully into shutdown, and our Prime Minister has made the point that we have to be balancing lives with livelihood. And that has become one of the little slogans that we've picked up over time, because as most people would know, we're not in a great financial position. So it has always been, how, you know, do you lock down the economy? You know, at one point he said, well, you know, we don't want to survive COVID and then die of a recession. So these were the, you know, so these were the choices. He's really a very frank speaker. So we did not have total lockdown.
Yeah.
So what we had was a variety of things. And I know some Jamaicans were kind of confused because the curfew hours kept changing depending on what was happening. There were some lockdowns in some communities. So UWI, of which I'm part, I was very proud that we were actually doing some you know, geoinformatics, helping them to identify hotspots, and they would use that information then to identify which communities had to be closed down. Social distancing, right now in Jamaica, you have to wear a mask in public areas. That is mandatory. The biggest thing for us, and one of the key differences between us and Trinidad, is that we have a lot of tourism in Jamaica, and by some estimates, it's about 40% of the economy. So, and about 300,000 jobs when you consider all the indirect and so on. So when Jamaica closed its borders to international traffic, it was huge. So it was, we never closed to, you know, cargo and so on, and that has continued. But it was just a big thing because we were towards the tail end, but we still had a good month to go in the winter season. So that was massive. And I am a little bit involved in tourism in addition to teaching in programs and so on, because along with my sister, own a tourism small business. So that was quite a shock. You know, you go to the cities, the towns that are usually, you know, they have tourists, and you'd see the ships and you see the tour buses, all of that stopped overnight. So as we are right now, we reopened on back to, I forgot to mention that we had some other orders as well. People over 65 were required to work from home, and they still are. We had a month just up until June 1. People were non-essential people were required to work from home, if at all possible. So that was a big shock for many of us. As of June 1, then we started the reopening. Businesses still, and I'll talk more about that, businesses still have not fully jumped on board because they're recognizing there is need for, us to do a phase thing and for them to be ready. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But the biggest thing, and and after this I'll end, is that as of June 15, which would have been 2 days ago, we reopened to tourists. So that's been a bit of a shock, and I've thought about the conundrum that all our governments face, because they frighten the whatever out of us to get us to do the social distancing and wear all the stuff, the mask, and now then they say, okay, well, now we're going back to normal, and so therefore normal means tourism, and since our source markets haven't handled it that well, there's a lot of fear, about what does this mean. We have had to date 10 deaths, which is remarkable. We think, very sad for those, of course, but we were anticipating much larger numbers, and we have more or less flattened the curve considering our size. But will this now mean an upsurge? So there's a lot of fear, concern. But of course, if you're a tourism worker, this is hallelujah, thank you, Lord. I'm going back to work to earn my living.
Okay, good. Yes.
Yes.
It's really a balancing act, and a delicate balancing act. Right. So ladies, as seasoned professionals, I know you always have your ears to the ground. What are some of the comments you've been hearing about how businesses are now handling this delicate balance, between business continuity and managing health? What have people been saying?
Wherever I go, and I've, since we reopened, almost fully, well, as I said, except for schools, I've been moving around, getting back out to my clients and so on. And I must say that people are taking the health side of it very, very seriously. There isn't a place that I have gone to where I haven't been asked. I don't wash my hands, sanitize, ensure I have my mask on. I come up to a receptionist, there's a barrier this way, and I think people are taking that seriously. But what is concerning me though is, and as we look around and people get back into their businesses and they start to assess it, then they have to make some serious decision. And you're beginning to see, the rationalization, people putting things in place to ensure business survival. And in some cases, you see them doing it in conjunction with worker representatives. And I must say that the unions have really come on board, and they have been meeting and treating workers, unions and management have been meeting and treating, because everybody felt this. The union, even as an employer, felt it. So there have been discussions about, what sort of things we can put aside for a little while in the collective agreement. How can we move forward? But, in some other areas, I have a little concern with how some other areas where you don't have worker representatives, how they are dealing with it. And I am seeing some unilateral treatment in how they are dealing with the situation, and not enough dialogue with workers as to how can we move ahead. Take me into your confidence, talk to me, let's see if we can work out this together. So you're seeing some unilateral impositions of some very harsh situations there. For example, people being sent on vacation leave. I see one organization where people were sent on vacation leave for their 2020, and then they were sent on vacation leave for 2021 vacation leave. People's salary being cut unilaterally. Now, you see, the thing is, you have to do things in order for the business to survive. And everybody has the same interest, the survival of the business, of course. and that, that is also self-preservation. But it's a unilateral way that it's being done in some cases that is concerning me. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. And they have to be so careful, especially when we're in a unionized environment.
You're seeing discussions with the union where there is a unionized environment. But in most of our organizations, we don't have unions. And that is where you're seeing, particularly manufacturing, you're seeing layoffs, you're seeing reduction in the workforce, you're seeing salary cuts, and you're seeing a pullback of benefits. And again, it's concerning. It's concerning.
And people using COVID as an opportunity to do something.
You never know what is put into the wash there. If it's COVID related or if it's not.
Yes. Okay. And talk to us. Your ears to the ground. What have you been hearing?
Well, as Hyacinth was speaking, I'm thinking that we're actually living this right. I'm living this right now because my own institution, UWI, some hard decisions are being discussed at this particular point in time. I think that as we talk about this, as we balancing act that we have to think through. How do organizations manage that? Again, our Prime Minister has been saying of late that we're going to have to learn to live with COVID-19. And that now is, I think, different from how when we went into the pandemic, we kind of thought, okay, this will last for a little while and then it will be fixed. But now the idea of living with it brings in a whole new dimension. So, in what are organizations doing and so on. Well, I think that, first of all, as Hyacinth said, they're really paying a lot of attention to the health side of things. So we still have the mandatory social distancing and so on. So organizations are taking a little extra time. As I mentioned, we did say that June 1, we could begin, reduce the number of people who had to work from home. But then if we have social distancing, you still have to think about how many people can you actually have in the space at the same time. So, we're using the 6 feet rule. So organizations are spending a lot of time thinking about, all right, how do I organize my shifts, organize my workplace and so on, and really trying to get it right. And I think sometimes, as we talk about this balance, and I'll again talk about tourism. One of the things that has happened with tourism is that the reopening isn't just, okay, anybody just come in. We have what they call a resilient corridor, which means that only certain hotels, and I say specifically hotels. So if you're a guest house or you have an Airbnb or whatever, you are not included in phase 1. So only certain hotels which are certified by our agency TPDCO are allowed to open at this time. And when visitors come in, they can only be in a particular area and so on. So what does this mean? It means that we're trying to balance something in hospitality where we're normally warm and friendly with trying to be clinical and ensure that we don't transmit the diseases. So that's one of the things that we're thinking through in terms of tourism. But in other things that people are thinking through is about, do we want to go back to the way we were, to normal? So I think at the beginning of the pandemic, we were just trying to get this through till we go back to normal. But then, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, as we have thought about it, normal wasn't all that great. So, yeah,
was all normal.
Yeah, is it normal? And some of you are from Jamaica, so that means that some people were getting up, well, Trinidad too. I know people come from south to work in Port of Spain, getting up before day to, travel the distance in order to be at your desk. So do we really want that? So that is one of the things that we think about. And the third thing I'll mention is that organizations have been trying to think now, how do we regain, what relationship do we want to have with our customers? Because our relationships had to alter during this time period. As I said, we never fully shut down, but businesses shifted. There was a lot more online. curbside delivery, etc., by restaurants. So what do we do? How do we maintain customer loyalty? Is it good the way it is now? Should we go back to the way it was before? What do we keep? What do we give up? These are some of the questions we're having to answer as we move into the reopening phase.
Right. It's interesting, and you talk about transportation. This morning I was saying that I had one of the longest commutes working from home, moving from my bedroom into the spare room, because I had to stop to talk to my husband to explain something to him, stop and talk to my son, and that took a good 15 seconds.
Yes.
Normally it would have taken 2 seconds to walk from one.
Yeah, but all of a sudden, yes. And it's interesting. I was late for an online meeting this morning, and I was thinking, I'm normally in the parking lot 20 minutes ahead of time, you know, because I get there before the traffic, and I'm late for Zoom.
Yes.
No. Really I needed that coffee.
So folks, our audience, what we'd like to do is just stop for a few seconds now to give you an opportunity to just put in the chat if you can identify so far with anything that Anne or Hyacinth has said with respect to what's happening on the ground. So unionized environment, or have you been seeing, you know, where there's some draconian measures by companies or blatant disregard? Anything that you've seen that you can identify with what these ladies have said so far. So I'll give you a few seconds. Salary cuts, yes. That sounds like it's universal. The unions have been very active, yes. Unilateral agreements, no dialogue. Wow. Somebody said identify with everything said. Yes. That's Simone. You could put all of the above. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your participation. Earlier in the chat, I had put a tip of the day is to conduct a pulse survey of your team members. You'll be surprised some of the information you will get from them. You just ask them some simple questions, you know, what are their views about coming back in the office? Do they prefer working from home, working on site? I did that recently in my own organization, and I was so surprised. I thought I would see an overwhelming majority of persons think that they want to work from home. I was surprised that more than 60% of them said that they prefer to work at the office. It was really interesting. I suppose it's a social connection, the interaction. Maybe some persons don't have the convenience at home for them to really work properly. But it really was something that that was interesting for me.
Could I recommend to people a book that I love called Second Shift? The Second Shift, and it's by Arlie Hochschild, Hochschild. And in it's not
go again and answer that they will get
okay, and I'll put it in the chat in a bit. Arlie Hochschild. And I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right, but I can spell it. And I read that in my graduate work, and it was very fascinating because her essential point is that women in particular enjoy going out to work because when they're out at work, they have some sort of control over their environment and so on. And it is very important to them. When they're at home, they're doing this balancing act and so on. So she said that probably in the 90s, she wrote that book. And I think it's still relevant today. Today, I went into my workspace and I saw a colleague and I said, how are things going? She has 3 children, and she said, I want to resign from being a mommy. And I'm saying, no, you can't do that.
Yes, I tell you, it's really interesting the kinds of comments that you're getting from people. Some things you never thought you'd have heard. Good. It's really a new time. So ladies, we might have touched a little bit on some of the psychosocial issues, but I want us to delve a little deeper into it. So this pandemic has really run tires over us. What are some of the psychosocial impact now of this pandemic generally, and specifically as it relates to return to work? We mentioned the fears and maybe some financial loss and family dynamics. So,
yes, and I want to take off on what you said and what Anne said, because this really stuck with me as I traced how this when this pandemic emerged and what we did. I've been following it, and I saw that there was a disproportionate amount, a disproportionate burden placed on women. And I've been speaking to them, and they say, you know, when I am home, if I'm a working mother, I'm in the office, I give my full attention to the office. When I am home, my children associate, especially if you have young children, they associate a mother being home with time for me, attention. So if you are now home and you are expected to do these Zoom meetings and work from home, the children also have expectations. So it's always, you know, mommy this, mommy that. And then sometimes you have even the bigger child, you know, who is saying,
They shall be
nameless. You know, well, babes, what are we cooking today? You know, so they had that adjustment to make. And when I spoke to some women, they said, look, I just want to get back out to work because I had that well organized. That was a well-oiled machine. I dropped the children here, or somebody came and took care of the children, and I went to work. Now I am in the same space in which I am working, and there's a double stress of the homework and the office work. The kids want you to attend to them. But at this point in time, there are no, we're getting into the holidays, and there are no, you call it, those summer camps that you can put your children in. You don't have the daycare. So the stress is going to continue. And even as we go back out to work, it is even harder because we have to find something for these children to do, find somebody to support them. And I really, you know, acknowledge what it is and say, maybe I'll get that book and read it, because I saw that there was a disproportionate burden placed on women during this. Some of them are happy to get back out, but even in getting back out, we know that, you know, there is the psychosocial impact. So organizations have to look at how are we going to support them even as they come back out, and maybe men also, because men have that responsibility and they have that burden too. So we have to be paying attention to that.
Okay. Do we have some men online who maybe want to raise their hand to say if they have that experience as well? Let's not marginalize the daddies.
Second show, is it?
Oh, okay. I see my book has shown up.
Yeah.
The book I mentioned. Yes, Francis just posted it. Yes.
Yes. I remember a friend of mine saying that, listen, Georgia, I'm going to work to rest. So what are the men saying, Anne, or what are the other psychosocial issues that keep
well, I actually thought about a little bit about this. As you know, this is where my headspace is at. And I went to look at the grief scale. And I know many of us think about grief, you know, when someone dies, whatever, we go through the 5 stages. And I actually tried to relate that a little bit. So the first stage is denial. And I think that many of us went through this. So if we were to put our heads back a couple months back, you know, we were all watching what was happening in Europe and well, China and then Europe and so on. But that was distant because, you know, we're all the way over here. So that didn't really seem like a big thing to us. And I'm actually writing a book right now, and I was reflecting on a conference I went to for the purposes of the book just before this thing hit. And we're all there and we're saying, oh, there's, you know, patient zero is in Jamaica. We shouldn't be touching, and we're all hugging because we're hugging people in the Caribbean. And then all of a sudden life just turned upside down. So then so after denial, then we had the anger part. And the anger part, and I want to really think through this a little bit, because these are some of the things. Remember, now everybody doesn't go through the stages at the same time. So at the same pace, I'm sorry. So when we think about the anger, some people may still actually be there. So what were some of the stages we have seen in the anger things we have seen? Well, people get upset at the person who brought it into the community. And, you know, it's not just in the Caribbean this has happened. We have seen incidences of it happening overseas. We have some of our healthcare workers who are marginalized. We're angry at them because you are a potential carrier of it. Even taxis didn't want to carry some of the nurses, so that the government had to be doing stuff, helping them out. We have people after the periods of the lockdown. I think we've been very patient in the Caribbean, but some people are really chomping at the bit now, you know, because this is very, very difficult. Then we had the bargaining stage. And in the bargaining stage now, we're trying to think through, well, okay, what ifs. So, what if we had closed down a week earlier? I know in Trinidad you got a big influx because of a particular group. So what if we had never let that group in? So there's some second guessing, and everybody's suddenly an expert on how we can flatten the curve and so on. So there's that type of bargaining. But on the positive side of that type of bargaining, we have seen, I think, a spiritual awakening. So, since people
Yes.
cannot go, in my instance, to church, it's online. And I've had friends say, well, I can go to 3 services in a day because, of course, you can just join one at 7, another one at 9, and so on. And that is interesting. These are things that people are doing. The 4th stage is the depression stage. And this is a stage that we have to worry a little bit about if that is coming into our workplace. So again, in the US, you're seeing cabin fever. That's the term they use. Now, we're lucky in the Caribbean that we have a lot of green spaces and so on. And you generally have, not everybody, but many of us have larger spaces, or you can come out. But, when I realized that in Europe, some of them are in a 1-to-1 space for weeks and weeks at a time.
Yeah.
But then there is that kind of depression that may come about. You can't, you can't go visit your mommy or your grandmommy, and, Zoom only takes you so far and so on. And then the final stage is where the government is trying to get us to with this idea of you have to live with COVID-19, is the acceptance. So I think as people come back to work now, we would love them to be in the acceptance mode, that they're saying, okay, so we are back here. But we have to be careful because, as I said, some people may still be in the anger stage. So those parents we're talking about managing with their children, some are saying, this is not fair. No, I have to become teacher. And if you have 3 children, you're teaching this one for this syllabus, this one for another syllabus, and so on and so forth. We can expect that, and we need to be ready in our workplaces to do that.
Yes. Thank you so much. Folks, I just love the perspective, the different perspective that these 2 ladies bring. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying it. Good. Now, let us turn our attention now. What do you think are your top 2 priorities for a successful return to work on site? If you were to choose 2 things, what would be your top
2 things I'll choose? Well, of course, the health issues, and then reskilling. Right, so let me talk about the health.
And then what? Sorry, the other one wasn't clear.
Reskilling, yes.
Reskilling, okay.
Let me talk about the health, and particularly in our manufacturing and our oil and gas industry. We have to look at, we talk about the hygiene issues that we must conform to, the hygiene standards, the washing your hands, the wearing of the mask, and sanitizing, and you see it, people are sanitizing their places and whatnot. But there are some other things that we have to think about even further. In some jobs you have to wear full personal protective clothing, and employers have to be sure that they provide these things. It's just not about a mask. So healthcare workers and so on, you have to have that. Manufacturing have to look at the things like their ventilation in their workspaces. If these workspaces are process plant or manufacturing kind of spaces, look at your ventilation, clean your filters, to be sure that you are creating that environment in which people can feel safe and healthy and secure inside of there. If you have to do physical barriers, do that. And if there is the need, instead of having a physical kind of interaction, you can do a drive-through kind of service, or even put up screens and so on. So the health goes really beyond just the washing of the hands and wearing of the mask. So for particular organizations, they have to look at how they're operating, what they're doing, and take the steps that are necessary for that particular environment. I've been talking to some of the people in the oil and gas industry, and even though the economy is opening up, and government is going through this phased approach, and really by the 22nd, everything would have been opened up. But there are some organizations in the oil and gas industry saying that they are holding out until July. Some of them would have had, particularly the shift workers, people who have shift workers and 24/7 operations, they have been holding a shift in reserve all along. Because if you have 5 persons on a shift and one tests positive, or even have a hint of, some kind of concern, you have to remove that entire shift. Then what happens to your operations? So they have been holding a shift in reserve. So that shift can come in and the business can continue. And then you put another shift in quarantine while that is happening. And they are saying they're going to hold on to that for way into July, because they want to be doubly sure that they are secure, they don't have any risk, they minimize it as much as they can. So that was my top priority, in terms of, successful return. And the other one, we really, really have to look at upskilling our employees by way of digitization. There's so much that could be done for work, in terms of technology. And we should have been able to move more seamlessly into working from home. But some people struggled. Some people did it easily, but some people struggled. They really struggled. We have in going forward to take steps to reduce avoidable physical interaction. Yes, so, and some of those things may become permanent, and we have to look at that. So organizations have been resisting this. I know I've gone into organizations and I want to hold meetings with some of the key people. And I say, well, let's Zoom. I've been using Zoom for years. Let's Zoom. No, we don't like those foreign things in our IT systems. It's a risk. And overnight they started using Zoom. Overnight they started using.
Yes.
And the IT systems held up. You put your VPNs in place and you made it secure. And business continued for the most part. They jumped headlong into it. So we have to be more open-minded about these things. Employees have been asking for flexi time for years. And managers will say no, because they are accustomed managing people by seeing them. Now you have to manage for results. I don't necessarily have to see you. Yeah. So again, overnight we went into more than flexi time. We went into remote working arrangement.
Everything.
So we can do it. We can do it. So the time has come to upgrade, to eliminate what is necessary, and to take our workspaces into the 22nd century. Really.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Hyacinth, I think maybe when you were using Zoom years ago, it wasn't sexy at that time. Zoom is sexy now.
But it was
virtual
for me.
It was for nobody. So it has to be
the end thing. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to look at it from 2 perspectives, because we're primarily service in Jamaica. So from the emotional as well as the physical. So my area of research is something called emotional labor, which is something we all do every day. When you smile with customers, you make them feel welcome, warm, etc. And it's particularly relevant in tourism, which is one of our major service sectors. And when you think about it, and I was reflecting on the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, we are now going to be trying to balance this maintaining social distance with hospitality and warmth and so on. And we are actually placing a huge burden, and emotional labor is an invisible burden at the best of times. But think about this. You are coming from a community. You're probably going to take public transport to a particular point. Then maybe if you're lucky, the staff bus will take you there. Then you're going to go into a hotel where you're going to be interacting with people who are coming from places that have not managed the pandemic as well. So, and you're expected to smile, be welcoming, warm, friendly, and all these things. What happens when they tell you they're not going to wear their mask, even though they agreed to? This is one of the things that you must do if you're entering Jamaica. You now have to have that burden of saying, sir, I cannot serve you, or madam, or the guest is a return guest and they're used to shaking your hand and so on. And you don't want to do that because, we don't do that anymore in this new Jamaica. So I think that we have to pay attention to some of what the turmoil that individuals are going to be facing as especially those who are on the front line, because they're directly exposed, and we need to support them. And then the second priority, I think, would obviously be the physical aspect of the workplace. People are saying, am I going to be safe? I read recently that the number one thing for American workers is, I think they said 60% of them worry about carrying the disease home to their families. So if you're in the health sector,
Yes.
if you are in the, of course, it will probably be 90% for you. But if you're in any type of exposure, you're going to be worried about that. So your workplace has to let you feel safe as possible. We know that there's no risk-free thing, but to the extent that's possible, are they practicing social distancing? Are they allowing you to sanitize, do all that is necessary so that you can feel safe? And I think that would be the second priority.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just put a question in the chat box. Which do you find more difficult or more challenging for you, wearing a mask or maintaining social distance? But let me tell you, folks, for me, I think a mask is going to kill me before COVID does.
Listen, it is really a hassle for me. It really, really is.
I just got used to it, the new normal.
Simone is putting some
Yes,
for the mask.
Okay, the mask is winning by a landslide.
Yes, landslide victory for the mask.
Mm-hmm.
All right, ladies. So let us look now at this phase resumption. We're coming to a little controversial thing now, an issue. So many companies are phasing in, and they're phasing people in cohort. As these companies embark now on a phased resumption of work on site using cohorts and rosters, do you believe it's important to maintain adequate representation in those cohorts? For example, how many women, how many men, what gender, what race, how many persons from one department, how many managers, leaders? Talk to me about that. Do you think that is important when you're coming back to make sure you have an adequate representation in each group?
Yeah, I thought about that and I wondered about it. The first thing, we shouldn't discriminate. We shouldn't be making these decisions and we are discriminating against any particular group. So if we take that out of the equation, is there a business need to have proper representation? That's the question I would ask. In terms of work that is done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working with an organization where, there's a facilities department and they are coming back in on a phased basis. And majority are men, you have a few women, but they're coming back in on a phased basis. So, I'm saying, is there a need to say, okay, bring them back in proportion to the population,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And I don't even think the organization thought about it. There are other organizations where you have large group,
yes,
large group of people. So for example, in a call center where you have a lot of women and, you have some men and you are coming back on site and you may have to do some rotation for physical distancing and so on. Maybe in a situation like that, you might want to think about balancing it, because you may be fulfilling another need, and it's not that you're discriminating. I don't know. I think it really comes down to the business and what is the business need to do so. Take discrimination practices out of the equation altogether, but is there a business need to have proper gender representation in the workplace? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. And tourism, talk to us.
Well, I believe in diversity because we know that diversity brings creativity, energy, new ideas, so all of these things. So I think that is important, but I would love us to think about it differently. And I really believe that this pandemic has created an opportunity for us that we should not waste. There's a sense in which we try to do this diversity thing, but we do it badly. And age, one of the things I've studied a little bit is the variation of age in our workplaces. So because, we're all living longer and so on, you have people who are in their 80s. I can think of someone in my workplace who's in the 80s and, his energy outstrips everybody else combined. And very, very active, very, very sharp and everything. Right. And then we have people who are 18. So we have diversity, but here's the thing. generally we don't leverage that diversity. So we have the younger ones, these old folks can't bother with them, and then we have the older ones saying, oh, I can't bother, and older ones sometimes have people in their 40s saying, oh, those millennials, slash curse words. So we're not leveraging it. So I think that one of the things that coming out of it, we should be really focusing on not so much just bringing people back to get a particular balance, but as Hassan said, what is our goal? Let the work drive it. So I love what Kobe says, begin with the end in mind. And I think the end actually is a new end, because this, again, back to my thing about opportunity, I think that this has helped us to understand that it doesn't have to be the way that we have been doing it. So we have seen some creative things happening during the pandemic as organizations have struggled to, find a way to deal with it. Yes, we're seeing that in tourism, but we're seeing a lot of innovation in the public sector too, as they have scrambled a lot to manage this. So as you begin with the end in mind, now that's what's going to drive it. Who do we need to achieve this new way of operating? And I also think then we should put in the balance who works well from home. So some of it, we have 60% of people are dying to come out to work. We also have 40% by that balance who are saying, I could stay at home and do my job very well. So should we bring those 40% back because, we need a meal, you're it, Tom, or should we say, well, okay, you're doing a good job from home, it works from you, continue to do that and just come in one day a week. So I think there's a balancing act that we can use.
Yes. Thank you so much, Hyacinth and Anne. And this is a tricky one and a delicate one. Sometimes, are we doing it for tokenism?
Yes.
Why are we doing it? Yes. I fully appreciate when you talked about the end in mind. Why do we want the people back? And who are the best ones to do what we want them to do? Yeah, good. Now, this takes us to something that has come up in this new pandemic era, policy writing and protocol. It seems these days everybody has now become an expert at writing policy. So I'm going to stop for a minute and ask or try, just put in the chat, what's one of the policies that you've written recently or protocol? Because I can imagine over the last few months, you've been spending a lot of time reviewing policies, writing protocols. So just hit us up a line in the chat. Tell us what are some of the things that you've been working on. Work at home, yes. Clean desk policy, yes. Flexible working policy, return to work, yes. Good. Office, wonderful. And of course, we know that there is no one size fit all. So there are some templates that we can use, but you have to know your own situation. Some of the things that you do in a service environment might be totally different in oil and gas or in manufacturing. Yeah, so we're seeing virtual engagement. Wow, lots of policies people write. At the end of this, now we're going to have some letters behind her name. Expert writer, EPA. Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit now about protocols. What protocols
George, just don't mind. I just want to throw something into the mix there. I find I've been asked to relook job descriptions, particularly to accommodate people who are going to continue to work from home, because some organizations have now decided that we are going to make this a permanent feature.
Yes.
So I've been asked to relook job descriptions. I've been asked to relook how performance appraisals will be undertaken. Because people have to be measured differently. We are measuring now for results rather than the time spent on something, and how we set our goals, because the goal now has to be more results oriented, rather than input. It's an output. Yes.
So this one is. Yes, I know there are several companies that have revamped their budget and their whole strategy. So they've had to do a total rejig of their strategy. And as a result of that, the goals have changed.
But on that note, could I just make a quick point that the policy that I don't hear anybody talking about, or to enough organizations talking about, is related to customer service. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some new opportunities because we have been forced into this. So we need to do the whole thing. We're kind of doing a little patchwork because, people aren't coming into the restaurant. So, we need to do curbside, or we need to be able to deliver pensions online and so on. I think this is an opportunity for us now to think strategically and weave this into the way we do things. And I worry a little bit because, service is one of the areas I study. I worry a little bit that, people are just saying, okay, we're going to just, okay, thank God, now they can come back in. And I think that would be a shame, that we need to develop some policies around how do we deliver customer service that achieves our goals. And as you mentioned, Georgia, yes, absolutely, we can save space. We don't need to have these huge parking lots and people fighting for parking to come in physically if they can do it online and so on. So we need to start doing those policies, and I'm not hearing enough discussion about that.
Okay, good. So, ladies, we have about 8 minutes in this segment, and I wanted to just touch on two other things before we go. If you were to talk about a protocol or a support system that you would recommend for a successful resumption to work on site, what's one protocol or a support system that you would talk about, Hassan?
Yes, you're confining me to one, but I'll be disobedient to two. I really think we need to engage people in what we do. This reopening, people getting back into the workspace. A lot of times management sits in a little cocoon and they make these decisions and then they roll them out. Let's engage the people, have some dialogue, particularly where you have workplaces where you don't have union representation. Have discussions with the employees and hear what it is they have to say. You'll be surprised at some of the nuggets of gold that they come up with. And also we always have to be assessing the environment for risk. Even before we open back, we have to do a risk assessment and see what is in this environment that we have to deal with. Maybe it's something that we had not even been looking at before, but we have to look at it with through a new lens now because of this COVID situation. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so Hassan gave me two.
I'll just give you one, but I think it's a priority. Mental health. We do not like to talk about mental health in our region. It's a stigma. And I mentioned earlier the stages of grief. I want to remind us that some people are really scarred by this. We have some of us who are like, oh, this COVID thing is a hoax and blah, blah, blah. I'm not at all worried about it. And you have some people who are petrified of going back to work. So we need to really be thinking in our workplaces, how do we deal with those things? Because the person who is petrified is going to panic when, I who believe it's a hoax, I step into their personal space, or, think that, or I don't wear my mask because I think it's stupid. So we have to really be prepared. And this is where somebody mentioned EAPs earlier. This is where our EAPs need to kick in and be available. And we need to remove the sense of shame about if you need help, if your foot is broken. I always say this to people, nobody would think it's weird for you to go to the doctor. But if you're having a meltdown, everybody's like toughening up and deal with it. No, give them the space to do that. And let's put the systems in place and keep reminding people about them.
Yes, no, I fully appreciate that. And, how many of us, because of this lockdown and people have been home, some people work was a refuge for them. And now that they have to stay home, we have seen where domestic violence has increased.
Absolutely, and so many of the support systems.
How many of us are aware?
So many of the support systems. You can't physically go out to church anymore. If that was a place you used to go, you can't walk with your friend in the park or go to the bar or wherever. So those have been removed, and we have people silently melting down. We had a suicide the other day of a young student. We don't know why, but we see that overseas again. So we have to be ready for this.
Right. And I can share an experience. I asked our EAP provider to give me stats on usage last year, January to April, and I want to compare it now with January to April this year to see what the difference in usage is. get an idea, and I ask them to give me, just tell me what are the presenting cases, because they can't tell me who came and what they came for, but just an idea to present cases.
Yes.
So we understand what our people are going through, so that we can also have different things to support them. So I'm just putting this out there for our HR professionals, you know, we learn from each other, and we use best practice. Good. So the last one, ladies, before we go and we move into our next segment. So this pandemic now has proven how important it is for HR professionals to be business partners. What level of collaboration have you been seeing among HR practitioners and the other functional areas? You've been working with different HR professionals. What have you been seeing?
I think it's not so much what I have been seeing as much as what I would like to see. I would really like to see HR and the business partners in the organization, you know, line departments and so on, work together to look at the work, the way people work, and to see the extent to which we can digitize the much of the work that we do. Because, you know, a lot of times we just sit back and we say, okay, you know, this should be done, but we never really take the first step to get it done. And it takes something like COVID to throw us into the deep end to get it done. And I think HR should really lead the charge in that way. You know, go through, talk with your line managers and talk about the work, how work is done, how work flows. Could it be done better? We really have to take advantage of this situation now and keep that momentum going and take the way we work to another level. And we should, as far as possible, do what we can to avoid physical interaction. And there's a lot of technology that could help us to do that. And we should do it. We should take that step. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, we got the prompt. We have about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I can give you 2 of that 4.
So yeah, I think that this is a great opportunity. As you can see, this is my theme for the evening. But it's a great opportunity for HR people, because it really burns me that so many of us are not considered at the same level of you know, finance. So, you know, I know organizations that would say, all right, we don't really need an HR specialist, or we don't need somebody with professional training. And I'm saying, yeah, you wouldn't put somebody who doesn't have financial expertise or financial training to be you know, in charge of the money. So it's an opportunity for us to show our worth. So I think that right now we should be collaborating. We should be trying to sit at the table. But if you're not invited to sit at the table, you're going to have to invite yourself. So I would say that this is a time now when we dig deep into our creative hats. We go out there, we look at information, we see what is happening outside, what are some of the best practices. We do our research, and we come and we mention problems that other people might even think about, because they're thinking a lot. You know, I mentioned mental health. Who is thinking about that? You know, they're thinking about, okay, we're going to bring back in, you know, Georgia and Hanson and Tom and James, and they're not thinking about, okay, but how do we actually deal with them, you know, when they're at the workplace, and some of the conflict is something I expect to see a lot of happening, and so on. So I think this is an opportunity for us to do that. And I would just say, and I'm glad this is my parting thing, that we need to speak the language of the organization. So we need to be talking numbers, because that, you know, part of the time we talk about these are things we want to do. We need to do training. We need to do this intervention, but it always comes down to numbers. So Georgia, you mentioned earlier, for example, that you're going to be comparing last year versus this year. We need to know that. We need to know also our health costs. So we talk about, you know, people being stressed, but what about, do we see more people going to their physical doctors and so on? And therefore, what is that saying to us about maybe we need to have gyms working out, about workplace, you know, aerobics online, whatever. And I think that's how we can prove our value. So people, sometimes they're not going to ask you to be a partner, but you have to walk up to them and say, I'm going to partner with you, and that is why you need me.
Yes, there you go. Preach it, sister, preach it. ladies, this has been fabulous, fantastic. We're going to be moving over
ladies,
into our
been
new
awesome.
segment, our second segment, where we're going to be doing some case studies.
But
So
the link,
Francis,
and
over
I've
to
been
you.
putting the link in the chat so people can remember We're going to be starting back at 7:15. It's going to throw us out in just a minute. All of a sudden, it's going to turn off and we're going to talk. But I'm going to stop the recording here. And thank you, ladies. Take us out of presentation mode. And then please jump over using the link that I just put in. We're going to be answering questions and we're going to go to the case studies at 7:15 sharp. See you over there.
All right.
Okay.